My name is Dana White, and for 11 years I worked at the Harborview Athletic and Social Club in Charleston, South Carolina. I started as a front desk receptionist when I was 26 years old, fresh out of college with a hospitality management degree and a head full of dreams about working my way up in a luxury establishment. Harborview was the kind of place that people in Charleston talked about in hushed, reverent tones. It sat right on the edge of the harbor, with white columns out front and magnolia trees lining the circular driveway, and inside it smelled like cedar and expensive leather and the kind of money that had been around for generations. Membership was invitation only. The waiting list was years long, and the annual dues were more than most people in the city made in 6 months. I was proud to work there, even as a front desk girl. I polished that marble check-in counter every single morning like it was an altar. The membership coordinator position opened up about 2 years into my time there, and I applied for it immediately. My manager at the time, a kind older woman named Carol, pulled me aside before my interview and told me I was the strongest candidate they had seen in years. I got the job and I threw myself into it completely. I learned every member's name, their preferences, their birthdays, which locker they liked in the women's changing room, whether they preferred still or sparkling water at the poolside bar. I organized charity galas and holiday brunches and tennis tournaments, and I made sure that every single person who walked through those doors felt like the most important person in the building. Within 3 years, I was promoted to membership director, overseeing a team of 8 and managing a portfolio of over 400 active members. That was when I first encountered Melissa Crane. Her husband, Gordon Crane, was the CEO of a regional shipping logistics company called Crane Maritime Solutions, and he had been a Harborview member for about 5 years before I came into my role as director. Gordon himself was perfectly fine, actually. He was quiet, a little stiff, but always polite. He said thank you when you held a door, and he tipped the staff generously at the holiday party. Melissa, however, was a different story entirely. She had joined as a spousal member shortly after I became director, and from the very first day she walked in wearing a cream linen pantsuit and oversized sunglasses indoors, I knew she was going to be a handful. Melissa was the kind of woman who had decided somewhere along the way that being married to a wealthy man was an achievement that entitled her to treat every service worker she encountered like a minor inconvenience. She was not cruel in the dramatic, obvious way that makes scenes. She was cruel in that quiet, grinding, everyday way that is somehow harder to document and harder to fight. She never said anything outright horrible. She just made you feel, with every interaction, that you were beneath her notice and that your entire purpose was to anticipate her needs and absorb her disappointment when you inevitably failed to meet them. In my first year working directly with her, as a member, she complained 14 times. I kept records because I was a professional and I documented everything. She complained that the temperature in the women's lounge was 2 degrees too cold. She complained that the fresh flowers at the front desk were giving her a headache, even though those same flowers had been in that same spot for 9 years without a single complaint. She complained that a junior staff member named Kayla had looked at her with what she described as an attitude, even though Kayla was the most mild-mannered, soft-spoken young woman I had ever employed. Each time I handled it with grace. I apologized, I smoothed things over. That was my job, and I was good at it. But the complaint that sticks out in my memory, the one that I still think about when I need to remind myself why everything that happened later was absolutely justified, came about 4 years into Melissa's membership. I had a new hire on the front desk, a young man named Travis who was 22 years old and just starting out. He was enthusiastic, a little nervous, and still learning the specific rhythms of a place like Harborview. One afternoon, Melissa came in through the main entrance without her membership card, which was not unusual since most of our longtime members rarely carried them anymore. Travis, doing exactly what he had been trained to do, politely asked her for her name so he could verify her in the system. Melissa stopped walking. She turned to look at him the way you might look at something unpleasant you had stepped on. Then she said, loud enough for the 3 other members in the lobby to hear, that she had been coming to this club for 4 years, and if this boy did not know who she was, then perhaps he should not be working at the front desk of an establishment like Harborview. Travis turned the color of a strawberry. He apologized immediately, and waved her through. But the damage was done. She had humiliated him publicly and deliberately, and when she came to my office that afternoon to formally lodge a complaint about Travis' incompetence, I sat behind my desk and smiled and took notes and told her I would look into it, and inside I was absolutely furious. I did not discipline Travis. I went to his desk after Melissa left and told him he had done everything correctly and that he should never let a member make him feel otherwise. But there was only so much I could do. Melissa was the wife of a significant member. Gordon Crane's membership tier was one of our top 3 revenue brackets. My general manager, a man named Arthur Finch, made it very clear to me on more than one occasion that the Cranes were to be handled with exceptional care. So I handled them with exceptional care. And I kept my records because I was the kind of woman who kept records. Things continued this way for years. Melissa's behavior never escalated into anything that crossed a bright enough line to act on, and I continued doing my job. I was good at my job. In fact, I was exceptional at my job, and in year 9 of my time at Harborview, Arthur Finch retired. He called me into his office one Thursday morning and told me he was leaving at the end of the quarter, and that he had recommended me to the board as his replacement. I sat very still in that chair and kept my face composed while my heart was doing something close to cartwheels. I had been working toward that moment for nearly a decade. Then he told me the board had decided to go with an external hire. His name was Brad Holt. He was 44 years old. He had spent 12 years managing a golf resort in Scottsdale, Arizona, and he had never worked a single day in a historic member-driven social club on the East Coast. He had no idea how to read the specific social dynamics of a place like Harborview, no understanding of the legacy expectations our oldest members carried, and no instinct for the kind of quiet, meticulous relationship management that had kept this club thriving for decades. But the board felt, as Arthur carefully explained to me, that Harborview was ready for fresh leadership. Fresh. As if 11 years of institutional knowledge and a 400-member portfolio I had personally curated was somehow stale. I went home that night and I cried for exactly 1 hour. Then I washed my face, made myself a cup of tea, and started thinking clearly. I did not quit. Some people thought I should have, and honestly a part of me understood that impulse. But I had been building something at Harborview, and I was not willing to walk away from it just because the board had made a short-sighted decision. I stayed on as membership director under Brad Holt, and I watched him struggle for 6 months to understand a place that I could have navigated blindfolded. I helped him. I genuinely did. I answered his questions and introduced him to members, and explained the unwritten rules that governed every corner of that building. I was professional. I was gracious. I was quietly waiting. What I was waiting for was the call I received on a Tuesday morning in October, 3 years after Brad Holt took over as general manager. It came from a number I did not recognize, and the woman on the other end introduced herself as Carol Whitfield, the chair of the Harborview Board of Directors. I had met Carol twice at board events, a sharp, precise woman in her late 60s who wore her silver hair short and her opinions plainly. She asked if I had time to come in for a meeting the following morning, not at the club, but at a conference room downtown. I said yes, and I did not sleep that night. The meeting was not what I expected. Or rather, it was more than I expected. Carol sat across from me with 2 other board members and a document folder, and she told me, with very little preamble, that Brad Holt had submitted his resignation effective the end of the month. He had been offered a position back in Arizona, closer to his family, and he was taking it. The board had spent the past several weeks reviewing the club's performance over the past 3 years and comparing it to the decade prior. The numbers were not what they wanted to see. Member retention had dipped. New membership applications had slowed. 3 of the club's longest-standing patron families had quietly let their memberships lapse without renewal. Then Carol slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward me. It was a summary of Harborview's membership metrics from the 11 years I had served as coordinator and then director. The retention rate during my tenure was 94%. The waitlist had grown from 40 names to over 200. Revenue from member events had tripled. She looked at me over the top of her reading glasses and said that the board believed they had made an error 3 years ago and that they wanted to correct it. They were not just offering me the general manager position. They were offering me a partnership stake in the club, a restructuring deal that had been in quiet negotiation for months, in which 3 of the original founding families were selling portions of their equity. The board wanted to bring in a managing partner who had skin in the game, someone who knew Harborview the way a person knows their own home. They wanted that person to be me. I sat with that for a moment. I made sure my voice was steady when I responded. I told Carol that I was very interested and that I would need to review the terms with my attorney before signing anything. She nodded like she expected nothing less. We shook hands across that conference table, and when I walked out into the October sunshine, I stood on the sidewalk for a full 30 seconds, just breathing. 6 weeks later, I signed the papers. Dana White, managing partner and general manager, Harborview Athletic and Social Club. I framed the signature page. It hangs in my office now, right next to the window that looks out over the harbor. The first few months in my new role were consuming in the best possible way. I restructured the events calendar, brought on 2 new staff members, renegotiated our catering contracts, and personally called every member who had let their membership lapse in the past 2 years to personally invite them back. 7 of them renewed within the first month. I was in my element in a way I had not felt since Brad Holt took over, and the staff noticed. There was an energy in the building again, a kind of hum that comes when a place is being run by someone who genuinely loves it. It was about 2 months into my new position when I reviewed the membership renewal queue for the upcoming quarter, and I came across the Crane file. Gordon Crane's annual membership renewal was due in 6 weeks. Renewal at Harborview was not automatic at the top-tier levels. It required a brief review by the membership committee and sign-off from the managing partner, which was now me. Standard process, always had been. I opened the file and reviewed the account history the way I reviewed every file, thoroughly and without assumptions. What I found was not surprising, but seeing it all compiled in one place was illuminating. 14 formal complaints from Melissa Crane over the years. 3 incident reports filed by staff members involving altercations with Melissa, none of which had been formally acted on under previous management. 2 written warnings sent to the Crane account, both of which had been marked resolved with no follow-up documentation. A note from Arthur Finch's tenure that simply read, "Revenue significant account, handle with care." And a more recent note from Brad Holt's time that said member relations ongoing, monitor. Monitor. As if 11 years of documented poor conduct was a situation that simply required observation. I also pulled the staff feedback logs, which was something I had implemented in my first month as managing partner. Anonymous quarterly surveys where staff could flag member conduct issues without fear of retaliation. In the most recent survey, 3 separate staff members had mentioned a female member at the top-tier level who made them feel uncomfortable and unwelcome. 2 of them had described feeling like they could not do their jobs properly when this member was in the building. One of them said, and I am paraphrasing here, that she dreaded coming to work on days when she knew this particular member was scheduled for her usual Thursday afternoon visit. That was Melissa Crane. I knew it without needing to ask. I sat with the file for a long time. I thought about Travis, that young man at the front desk, turning red while Melissa humiliated him in front of other members. I thought about Kayla, my mild-mannered front desk girl, being accused of having an attitude. I thought about all the times I had smoothed things over and absorbed her behavior on behalf of my staff, because I did not have the authority or the institutional backing to do anything more. I had both of those things now. I brought the Crane file to the membership committee meeting the following week. I presented the documented history clearly and without editorializing. I laid out the complaints, the incident reports, the staff feedback, and the pattern that emerged when you looked at all of it together. The committee, 3 members of the board, and 2 senior staff, reviewed everything carefully. Then I told them my recommendation. I was recommending that Gordon Crane's membership be renewed as a standard individual membership, removing the spousal extension that covered Melissa. Gordon had never caused a single problem. He was welcome at Harborview indefinitely. But Melissa's spousal membership would not be renewed. Based on the documented pattern of conduct toward staff that violated our member code of conduct, her membership access was being revoked. The committee approved it unanimously. I drafted the letter myself. I spent more time on that letter than almost anything else I had written in my professional life because I wanted it to be absolutely precise. It was addressed to Gordon Crane as the primary account holder, and it explained in measured, professional language that following a review of the account, the club would be renewing his individual membership with pleasure, and that after careful evaluation of documented conduct history, the spousal membership extension for Melissa Crane would not be renewed for the upcoming membership year. It cited the specific clauses of the member code of conduct that had been found to be in violation. It was polite. It was thorough. It was utterly final. I sent it certified mail on a Wednesday morning. I will be honest with you. I did not know exactly how Melissa would react, but I had a general sense that it would not be quiet. What I did not anticipate was how quickly it would arrive at my door, or how it would arrive. I expected a phone call from Gordon's assistant, or perhaps a strongly worded letter from a lawyer. What I got, at 9:45 on the Friday morning after the letter was delivered, was Melissa Crane herself walking through the front doors of Harborview with the energy of a woman who had been rehearsing this entrance since Wednesday. She was dressed beautifully, as she always was, in a camel-colored coat and heels that clicked on the marble floor with great authority. She walked past the front desk without acknowledging Travis, who was working that morning, and came straight toward my office. My assistant, a young woman named Bree, intercepted her in the hallway outside my door and told her politely that I was in a meeting and asked if she could schedule an appointment. Melissa told Bree, in a voice that carried clearly through my closed office door, that she did not make appointments to speak with staff. I heard that. I set down my coffee cup, stood up, opened my office door, and looked at Melissa Crane standing in my hallway. She looked back at me. Something shifted in her expression, just slightly, when she realized that I was the one she was going to be dealing with. I think in her mind, she had come here to storm into Arthur's old office and put some nervous general manager in their place, and it had perhaps not fully registered until that moment that the nervous general manager she was used to intimidating was gone, and I was standing in his place. I smiled. I told her good morning and invited her into my office. She came in and sat down across from my desk, and she launched immediately into what I could tell was a prepared speech about the absurdity of the letter, the history of the Crane family's relationship with Harborview, the amount of money her husband's membership contributed to the club annually, and the fact that she intended to have this decision reversed immediately. She was controlled, but her voice had an edge to it, the kind that comes when someone is angrier than they want to show. I let her finish. I did not interrupt. When she was done, I folded my hands on my desk, and I told her that I understood this news was upsetting and that I wanted to be transparent with her about the process. I explained that the decision had been made by the membership committee following a formal review, that it was based on documented conduct history spanning several years, that the specific policy violations were outlined in the letter she had received, and that the decision was final. She told me that she would be speaking with the board. I told her she was welcome to do that, and that I was happy to provide the board with the same documentation the committee had reviewed. I also mentioned, gently, that I was now a managing partner of Harborview, which meant this decision fell within my direct authority, and that the board had already been briefed. That landed. I watched it land.
She tried a different approach then.
She asked me, with a kind of forced reasonableness, what specifically the issue was, and whether there was something that could be done to address it. Whether she could meet with the committee, whether there was an appeals process. I told her there was not a formal appeals process for membership conduct reviews, but that I was happy to walk her through the concerns that had informed the decision. I opened the file on my desk, the same one I had presented to the committee, and I began reading from it.
Calmly.
Matter-of-factly. The complaint about the flowers. The complaint about the temperature. The incident with Travis. The incident with Kayla. The pattern, documented over years, of conduct towards staff members that fell below the standards Harborview expected from its members. I watched something happen to Melissa Crane's face as I read through that file. The rehearsed anger started to give way to something more complicated. She knew these incidents.
She remembered them.
And she was realizing, perhaps for the first time, that someone had been writing them all down. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said that she had never intended to be difficult, that she simply had high standards, and that she would have appreciated being spoken to directly if there was a problem. I looked at her steadily. I thought about 11 years of absorbing her behavior because no one had the authority or the will to push back. I thought about Travis and Kayla and the staff member who dreaded coming to work on Thursdays. And I said, very evenly, that I appreciated her perspective and that unfortunately the committee's decision stood. She left. The heels clicked back down the hallway, across the marble lobby, and out through the front doors. Travis, at the front desk, caught my eye from across the lobby when she walked past. I gave him a small nod. He gave me a smile that he tried very hard to keep professional and mostly succeeded. Gordon Crane called me himself that afternoon. He was calm, as I expected him to be. He asked if we could speak candidly, and I said of course. He told me he had read the letter and the summary documentation I had included, and that he appreciated the professionalism with which it had been handled. He said he was not going to fight it. He renewed his individual membership the following week, and he has been a model member ever since. He even sent a very gracious note when we hosted a harbor restoration charity event last spring. He tipped the staff generously at the holiday party, same as always. Melissa Crane has not come back. I heard through the particular social grapevine that Charleston sustains so reliably that she had told several people in her circle that Harborview had become terribly managed and she had chosen to take her membership elsewhere. I thought that was a reasonable face-saving story, and I wished her well with it privately. The Palmetto Club across town is a fine establishment. But here's the part of this story that I want to make sure I tell you, because it is the part that matters most to me, more than the membership revocation, and more than the satisfying click of those heels walking out my door. About 3 months after all of this happened, I was doing my usual morning walkthrough of the facility before we opened, the kind of quiet routine I had kept for 11 years and intended to keep for many more. I came around the corner near the front desk, and I found Travis restocking the welcome brochure rack, and when he looked up and saw me, he said good morning, and then he said something else. He said that working at Harborview had started to feel different lately. That he actually looked forward to coming in now. That the whole building felt different. I told him I was glad to hear that. I kept walking and I finished my rounds and I went to my office and I sat down at the desk that used to belong to Arthur Finch and looked out the window at the harbor, at the water catching the early light, and I felt something settle in my chest that I recognized after a moment as the particular satisfaction of a thing being exactly as it should be. My name is Dana White, and I am the managing partner of the Harborview Athletic and Social Club in Charleston, South Carolina. I have worked here for 14 years. This is my club. And every single person who works within these walls knows that when they come through that door, someone has their back. It took 11 years. But I got here. And I am not going anywhere.